Hari Om. The last 2 weeks, can you all hear me clearly? For the last 2 weeks, we have gotten into the introduction of Bhagwan Shri Adi Shankaracharya ji and his life. In this session, have I covered the entire spectrum of his works? No? Okay. He lived a very short life because that is how he was blessed to be born. He lived a total of 32 years. And in those 32 years, Bhagwan Adi Shankaracharya ji, he traveled all across Bharatvarsha. The reason I say Bharatvarsha is the overall Bharat as it was before 1947. I don't know if I have spoken about that, but there is one question that I would like to ask all of you. We hear stories that Bharat, or within the Bharat, there was Gandhara, Kaikeya. On the northern hemisphere, till the edges of Tibet, what is today's Tibet. Do you know what is the second official language in Burma? It's Tamil. Because there are a lot of people from Chettinad that they have settled there for business purposes. And Sri Lanka. This was the Vishal Bharat. Now my question is, when did this Vishal Bharat break down into the shape and size that it is today? When was the last time it was that Vishala, that over-encompassing all these regions that I just mentioned? 1,000 years ago, you said? Okay. Yeah, I got 1,000 years ago. Anybody else? Little louder, please. 4,000. Guess ही तो करना है. You're not paying any fee for that. 1947 was the final axing. उससे पहले कब था वो अखंड? 7th century. I've heard all ranges of it. Now the answer, now the truth about it. Do you remember that in Indian independence movement there is something called 1857? First war of independence, first rebellion of independence. So after that, the British government was really shaken up, and in 1876, they started separating all these different portions away from India. So 1876, they started with Afghanistan, what is today Afghanistan. Not 4,000 years ago, not 7th century, not 1,000 years ago, 1876. So how many years ago? Mathematics, please. 146? Okay. 146 years ago. The photos and the accounts from there say that there were about 80% Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Buddha living in Afghanistan. Today, do you know how many live? 2%. Okay, one more guess. Zero is the answer. In 145 years, the demography has changed wherein there is absolutely no Hindu left. 145 years ago, it got separated with 80% Hindu. When I say Hindu, Hindu, Jain, Sikh, they were all integral part. There are temples there which are unattended. So just let that sink in, that it was not 1000 or 4000 or 5000 years ago. It was as recent as 145 years ago. Nepal was separated, then Tibet was separated, then Bhutan, Burma, Sri Lanka was separated, and all of these got separated in 1936, 10 years before 1947, or 11 years ago, 11 years before. And the final axing happened when East and West Pakistan was created. So when I say Bharatvarsha, I am talking of that which was prior to 1876. Not thousands of years ago, Mahabharat time mein hua hoga. Maybe at that time, no. And what shocks me as a teacher is that we as Indians or Hindu, we didn't even know that it happened just recently. So when I say this Vishal Bharata, that Bhubhaga where Bhagwan Adi Shankaracharya ji walked all of these places 4 times in his short lifespan, where at age of 8 he reached at the feet of his Guru, Govindam Bhagavat Padacharya. He lived with him up until the age of 16. So how many years did he actually effectively spend in reconstructing the entire Bharatvarsha and the Hindu base? 16 years. In that 16 years, if somebody's task was to walk all these 4 corners of Bharatvarsha, that itself is a great task. Right? There were no speed transport systems, especially for a sannyasi, that too. He walked. While walking, was he a tourist? Idhar do selfie le liye, udhar do selfie le liye. Was he being a tourist? No, he was not a tourist. He would visit these places wherein his sankalpa was to revive Hinduism. Why was it necessary? Couple of centuries before him, there was this dual effect of Buddha and Jain Mahavira. I am not talking of the later students, I am talking of the main primary ones that had. Up until then, under the umbrella of Dharmic Sanatana Dharma, there was nothing else challenging. I'll just take a slice of at that times how it was. In that period of time, every village, town, kingdom had several gurukulas. And how would the Gurukula function? That the community sends their children to those Gurukulas. Community, to support those Gurukulas to teach their children, would give them alms. So the brahmacharis would visit these households every day, early morning, and ask for alms for the Gurukula. Whatever comes for that day, that is how it fed the Gurukula. They were quite robust Gurukulas. For about 10 to 15 years, depending on the stream of knowledge that the student would learn, go back to the family and establish themselves in a profession, and then get married and give support to the entire family. Now when this Gurukulas, after Bauddha and Jaina influence, the towns started getting bifurcated or trifurcated. The kingdoms started patronizing, and when there is an influence of the kingdom taking one over the other, then the influence is little drastic or deeper. So the number of people that were supporting the Gurukulas as the Vedic tradition, when that reduced, the number of children that were coming to the Gurukulas reduced, because their parents had taken to Bauddha or Jaina. Socio-economic, religious impact. So the existing Gurukulas were in like a crossroad as to, if these traditions are not taught, if these knowledge systems are not taught to the next generation, down the lane we will not have these traditions. So they had to come up with, I call that, now looking back, calling it out is easy, I guess. I call that as a knee-jerk effect. So in that knee-jerk effect, what they did was, they encapsulated the entire thing and said, if the customs and traditions as rituals are maintained, and if it is given to the next generation, because with the short time that is available, with the number of students that are available, that's the best that can be done. Over next 2-3 generations, 2 centuries, right? But at least 4 to 8 generations after that, all that remained was only traditional customs and rituals that were being followed. The philosophy got alienated. Do you understand the situation? So when Adi Shankaracharya ji came into that picture, into that scenario, he said it has to now, it's high time, it has to be reconnected back. That the processes have to be connected back to the purposes, so that it is holistic in its picture. How did he go about? Wherever he went into the Gurukulas, where only these technical word of just the rituals is Karma Kanda, where the Karma Kanda is focused upon, he would have Shastrartha, like how when you do a thesis, you have to defend your thesis. Right? Any PhDs here? So you have defended your thesis. So you will be cross-questioned onto whatever you are proposing. You have to defend what you are proposing and win over them in that debate. Right? Is that fairly? In the Shastra Vichara, it was the same kind, wherein when he went in challenging into these Gurukulas, saying, there is a better integrated way, a higher way to look at these things. This is being limited by your perspective. See, today's intellectual conversation has, in my opinion, has gotten down to a level wherein it's very common to see that after a discussion, it has become a norm to say it is okay, say that, it is okay to agree to disagree. But the stakes were pretty high in those days. He said, if you can prove to me that whatever you are holding on to is way better than what I am proposing, I will follow you, dropping everything that I hold sacred. If you are convinced that that which I am proposing is higher and more integrating, then you will have to drop whatever you are doing and follow me. All the nuts, bolts, screws, everything is tightened. One of the greatest debates is with Mandana Mishra, where his wife is the judge, meaning she was well educated in all walks of the Vedic traditions. And then after 40 plus days, she declares that Adi Shankaracharya had a better way of integrating than what Mandana Mishra. And who was Mandana Mishra? He was somebody who had 6 Gurukulas running parallelly, and he was the dean of all those 6 Gurukulas. If he is coming to that understanding that Adi Shankaracharya ji had a better way of integrated outlook, imagine what is the impact on those Gurukulas. Imagine the impact of all those students who have gone through those Gurukulas. So Shastrartha, having that open discussion, was the format, that debating format, with which he travelled across 4 times. Okay. Was that the only task that he was doing? Walking itself is a big task. While walking, strategically walking to all these Gurukulas and one by one bringing them up to the speed of this integrated outlook called the Vaidika Sanatana Dharma. That itself is a mammoth task. Are you all with me? So 2 tasks I have said. One is just to walk around. Second is to reinvigorate the entire Gurukula system, because where is the key? Key is always in education. Key is always in that learning process. If that learning process is elevated, the entire population's mindset is elevated. And he achieved that by finally establishing 4 different mathas in 4 corners. And the northernmost is Jyotirmath or Joshimath. Southernmost, from where he started, is Sringeri. Kanchi came way later, hundreds of years later. It was not immediate there. In the east was Govardhanmath in Puri, and in the west is the Dwarakadhisha, Dwarkamath. Just about a week ago, Dwarkadhish Shankaracharya ji attained Mahasamadhi. The present Shankaracharya ji attained Mahasamadhi. Meaning that tradition which he started is still alive. Not just in those Shankara Mathas. If we talk about Chinmaya mission, Puja Gurudev had his Siksha from Swami Taponam Maharaj, but he took the Sannyasa Diksha, he was given that Sannyasa Diksha by Swami Shivanandji Maharaj. And Shivanandji Maharaj took that Sannyasa Diksha in Sringeri Matha system. So technically we all belong to the Sringeri Pitha Shankaracharya, and that tradition is still alive. That our tradition where we have, today the present head of Chinmaya mission is Swarupanandji. Swarupanandji, before him was Tejomayanandji, before him was Swami Chinmayanandji, before him Swami Taponam Maharaj, Swami Shivanandji, and the entire lineage of Shankara Matha at Sringeri, which was started by Adi Shankaracharya ji, whose guru was Govinda Bhagavad Pada, whose guru was Gauda Padacharya, whose guru was, I'm just checking. Koi? Shukacharya. Shukacharya's father is Vedavyasji. Vedavyasji's father Parashara. Parashara's father Shakti. So right here I have established about 7 to 8,000 years of lineage, unbroken lineage. He established these ashramas. So while he reinvigorated the entire Hindu society, entire Arsha Vidya society, which is the Bharat in the Bharatvarsha, he established the 4 mathas, and he gave a treaty called Pithamnaya Mathamnaya, an administrative beauty of work as to how to administer all these mathas that he has established. Okay. Get the point? Is that all was his work? While in 16 years that he lived doing all this, on the side, he created volumes of works which are a beauty in itself. The first set of, the way I look at it or categorize it is, Bhagavan Shankaracharya ji is also known as Bhashyakara, Bhagavan Bhashyakara. In the traditional learning process, he is often referred to as not Adi Shankaracharya ji, but he is often referred to as Bhagavan Bhashyakara. Why? He started his first Bhashya with Vishnu Sahasranama, because I remember I have spoken about it. When he was 8 years old, he has written primarily on what is the collection of work called Prasthanatraya. What is Prasthanatraya? Commentary on the 700 shlokas of Bhagavad Gita. First work. Second, how many Upanishads are there? It's okay to guess. Effortless thing. Bataiye. You had a number, please. 65. Anybody else? Who said that? There could have been more than 108, but 108 is definitely assured, because one of the Upanishad in which there is a dialogue between Bhagavan Sri Ramchandra ji and Hanuman ji, where the list of 108 Upanishad is listed. It is called Mauktika Upanishad. So through that Mauktika Upanishad, we are rest assured there are 108 at least, minimum. Of these 108, academically speaking, 10 of them are called major Upanishads, because whenever somebody had to establish a tradition of thinking, parampara. What kind of parampara are we talking about? Philosophical thinking pattern. So Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita, Nimbarka, Gaudiya, there are several sampradayas. You cannot just, start whimsically, this is how I think, therefore I am going to do it this way. You have to write justifying that particular school of thought through the Upanishads, through Bhagavad Gita and a volume called Brahma Sutras. And once you have proven, you have to go to these places of intellectual heightened living. There was Kashmir, Sharda Peetha in Dal Lake. Anybody been to Kashmir? Dal Lake गए हैं? तो क्या देखा आपने? No. There is Sharda Mandir, there is Sharda Peetha. There are two aspects to it. So this is still in Bharat, Kashmir. So around the Dal Lake there is a mount which is called Shankaracharya. That mountain itself is called Shankaracharya. On the top of it there is that Sharda Peetha which was established by Adi Shankaracharya ji himself. So you have to take your way of logic to that place of school of Pandits, and you have to again present this thesis, and they will cross question, then come down to Kashi. Then there are about 18 such places they'll have to get it approved. So all these different schools of thought, they proposed their principles of parampara through these 10 Upanishads. Therefore, academically, those 10 Upanishads are called major Upanishads. Isha, Kena, Katha, Prashna, Munda, Mandukya, Taitriya, Aitriya, Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka. These are the 10 Upanishads. So, Bhagavan Bhashyakara commented on these 10 Upanishads. Then Bhagavan Vedavyas ji, after having done his voluminous work, he consolidated the entire Vedic Sanatana Dharma into sutras, into aphorisms, that anybody having any confusion into the framework of Hinduism to be understood, you go to those Brahma Sutras. There are 555 sutras. So Bhagavan Bhashyakara commented on it. Along with that, he has commented on several other works like Vishnu Sahasranama, Sanat Sujatiya, to name a few. That itself runs in about 4 volumes. जो गीता प्रेस के books होते हैं, तो that whole bhashya of his runs in 4 volumes. That itself is another mammoth task. The next group of work that he has so beautifully artistically presented is called the devotional work. So anybody who has heard that Adi Shankaracharya ji is a Mayavadi, he talks about Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, he talks about Maya, very dry Vedantic philosophy that he has. Well, it's a wrong claim, because there is this volumes of work on the bhakti aspect of it. He himself was an ardent devotee of Bhagwan. Your proof kya hai bhai? Everybody said Shiva, that's why I'm like shocked. His Ishta Devata was Bhagwan Krishna. The very work that we are going to check, what is the first line? Bhaja Govindam. Bhaja Govindam. Govindam Bhaja. Govind kaun hai? Who is Govinda? Or maybe Swamiji, it was like, only for this work. Any work of his that you take, the first shloka that he has written or composed is called Mangalacharana, invocation. In that invocation, he is invoking only Bhagavan Krishna. Because that was his Ishta Devata. Hence, therefore, proven. So, his volume of work on bhakti, take any Devi Devata that you can think of within the matrix of our Vedic Sanatana Dharma. Take any Devi Devata. He has Panchakam, Shatkam, Ashtakam, Dashakam, Shatakam. He has written a composition on them. Mudakarartha modakam sada vimukti sadhakam. Have you heard this? Where is it from? Huh? No. Mudakara. Ganeshji. So Ganesha Pancharatna is again written by him. Today we heard the children beautifully sing Mahishasura Mardini Stotram. I call that as my first rap song. Ai sumanas 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 sumanohara kanti yute. It is not that he did not have vocabulary and therefore he repeated sumanas 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 sumana 4 times. Each one of them has a different sandhi vicheda, the way word is broken, and the meanings are several layers of meanings that he has incorporated in it. So the second volume of work that he has done is called the Bhakti Grantha. The greatest treaty of Bhakti Grantha that he has offered is called Saundarya Lahari. You have heard of that work? So Saundarya Lahari has 100 shlokas, but this 100 shlokas is specifically special. You talk within the framework of Hinduism, you talk of Bhakti, Jnana, Karma. You talk of Yantra, Mantra, Tantra. You talk of all these different sets of perspectives. Every single shloka of these 100 shlokas is called a mantra, and every mantra has all these different layers of perspectives incorporated. It's very difficult to imagine when today's poetry has come down to a point wherein you hear the modern day lyrics of Bollywood. Tu ladka, main ladki. Main ladki, tu ladka. दिखता है भाई, आगे भी बढ़ो. And they repeat it 8 times. Whenever you did something more than 3 times, we called it imposition. And that they call it as a poetry for a song. Pathetic. Imagine the depth that he has incorporated in these 100 shlokas. It's the heights of his presentation of thought, of bhakti in that work called Saundarya Lahari. Not to be undone, he has offered his salutations to Bhagwan Shiva, and it is called Shivananda Lahari, to name a few. Yes, Kala Bhairava Ashtakam is also written by him. That's why I say, any Devi Devata that you can think of, you will find a Panchakam, Shatkam, Ashtakam, Dashakam or Shatakam on that particular Devi Devata. I have already mentioned that while he established these mathas and ashramas, he has given the framework as to how to run these ashramas. Who should be the Mathadipati, the pontiff? How should they look at raising funds to maintain these? What should be taught? Who should be taught? What kind of students to be taught? How to propagate, how to sustain, how to flourish. And because of that framework, even after 2000 years, it is still a robust system that is running. That is called the work of administration. It's called Pithamnaya and Mathamnaya. So the first work was Bhashya. Second work was Bhakti Granthas. Third is the administrative work. Fourth, when you come to Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita and Brahma Sutras, especially the Upanishads, the language is not for a novice. You cannot just, oh, I had some time, so I just picked up an Upanishad and started reading through it. तो clean bold हो जाएंगे. Why? It is like a postdoc thesis. It's not for a casual read. It starts for somebody who has already accomplished certain stage, for them to guide them as pointers. That which has been pointed is in the Upanishad. So when we read this Bhagavad Gita, Upanishad and Brahma Sutras, the Vedantic words that have been used, the Vedantic concepts that have been used, the different frameworks that have been used, one needs to get introduced to them before you go into them, so that we get the best out of it. Best out of Bhagavad Gita, Upanishad and Brahma Sutras. So as introductory texts to introduce us to that vocabulary and framework of the Vedantic conceptualization, that which introduces us to it, those books, those written works are called Prakarana Grantha. You might have heard those names of those works. Tattva Bodha, Atma Bodha. Tattva Bodha introduces the vocabulary. Atma Bodha introduces the framework. Further research onto both of these aspects is well presented in Viveka Chudamani. Reasserting it by making sure that all possible loopholes that can be pointed at it, and nullifying each one of those loopholes with a constructed flawless logic, that is presented in Upadesha Sahasri. Then to ascertain Tattva, to ascertain the Swarupa, to ascertain the experience of that oneness of Brahman, there is treatises like Naishkarmya Siddhi, Advaita Siddhi. These are called Siddhi Granthas. These are all under Prakarana Granthas. Fourth set of volumes of work that he has accomplished. Now fifth set. Fifth set is, I call them as spontaneous outbursts. Situationally spontaneous outbursts. We have heard of the story where Bhagwan, while growing up, he was studying in Gurukula. His father himself was the Gurukula, Guru at the Gurukula. And as a brahmachari, you go out every day after morning Sandhya Vandana for Bhikshatana. You go out for begging alms. One such visit, he was at this house where the lady, that family was stuck with such sheer poverty that all that she had in her home was only few grains of dried amla, gooseberry. आमला समझते हैं? डाबर आमला केश तेल, उसका जो एसेंस जहां से निकलता है उसे आमला बोलते हैं. खट्टा होता है. So she had dried like about 4 or 5 pieces. So she brings those 4 or 5 pieces of amla and drops it with tears in her eyes, saying, beyond this, which was conveying, beyond this I do not have anything else to give to you, though I wish to. Looking, touched by her sincerity to give, and also moved by the sheer poverty that he saw. This was still when he was at his parents with his mother. He was barely about 4 or 5 years old. What came out as an outburst is called Kanaka Dhara Stotram. How many of you have had an opportunity to touch that? M.S. Subbalakshmi Amma has sung it very beautifully. Please YouTube it and you should be able to get it. I am not much of a singer, so I will not even attempt it. If you look at the work, the shloka, It has been written in the most complicated meter, chanda. It is not that he sat down, wrote it, proofread it, reread it, and did his drafts after drafts to fine tune it. It was an outburst. It came in that beautiful setting. And that work is called Kanaka Dhara Stotram. It is claimed that it is so powerful that if you are in clutches of poverty, if you sing that every single day, as soon as you take shower, sit in front of the altar and chant it every day, that entire stotra, for 100 days, Mother Lakshmi's Kataksha will be there, that you will come out of poverty. It has been experienced by many. When did he deliver that? When he was barely 4-5-year-old. Another such outburst that happens is when he was in Kashi. Have you been to Kashi? Yes, no. I would request, as a Hindu, please go visit. How many of you are planning to go to India this summer or winter, this winter and next summer? Please allot some time to Kashi. My request. What you see today as the improved part of it was how it was back in those days, it seems, that from Gangaji you could see Kashi Vishwanatha without any block. On one side there is Manikarnika Ghat, the other side of Vishwanath there is Harishchandra Ghat. Both these places there are continuous pyres of people that are, who have left this mortal coil, they are being taken care of. So one day as he was taking that shower coming up, there was this Chandala, the profession who take care of those dead bodies and put them on pyres and burn them. They are called Chandala. So this Chandala was walking right in front of Adi Shankaracharya ji, who had taken shower, and he was going directly into Kashi temple. If you have to get into the sanctum sanctorum, you have to have your clothes wet. So with those wet clothes he was walking in. Chandala cuts his way. So immediately it seems Adi Shankaracharya ji asked that Chandala to step aside. But the Chandala, just because of the profession, don't think that they are nobody. The Chandala paused and said, in a very amused tone, Sharirat Shariram va Atma Tattvat Atmam va. What duri kartum kim vanchasitvam? What are you asking to step away from what? If it is from the physical standpoint, that body of yours and this body of mine is made up of the 5 elements, there is no pavitra, apavitra there. If it is good, it is as good. If it is bad, it is as bad. Getting the point? If you are talking from the standpoint of that conscious principle, it is one and the same. There is no difference at all. There is no two. There is only one. And that alone is pervading here. So he understood immediately. Who? Adi Shankaracharya ji understood that momentarily there was a lapse in his perspective, and it was rightly corrected by that Chandala. Therefore, he immediately did Sashtanga Dandavat Pranam to that Chandala. And as an education to his own intellect, what came out as an outburst is called Manisha Panchakam. Manisha meaning his intellect. So he was speaking to his own intellect, because that was an uplifting experience that he had. Added to that, one more such outburst which happened in Kashi itself is this work called Bhaja Govindam. Bhaja Govindam is also known as aka Moha Mudgara. Moha Mudgara. Moha means our delusions. Mudgara, boxing. So direct smack boxing into our delusions to crush it. Mudgar also means the Indian club, not the dancing club, Baba. You know, जो अखाड़े में use करते हैं ना, like it is like a gada, mace, not gadha, mace. So they do the dumbbells kind of, which has a big heavy head and then there is a handle, wooden one. So that is also called Mudgara. Technical word for that in Sanskritam is Mudgara. Moha Mudgara. A thrashing or a beating onto the moha. Whose moha? Our own moha. So this Bhaja Govindam is an inspired event, and at that inspired event this outburst came in 30 shlokas. Before I step into it, let's step back and recap. In his short life of 16 years, though he lived 32 years, the effective work that he produced was in 16 years, 16 to 32. In that 16 to 32, he walked across India 4 times. When I say India, remember as Vishala Bharat, not as the broken one today. From Afghanistan to Burma to Tibet to Sri Lanka. All of this as Bharat. He has walked all of these. Second, he went through every single Gurukula, sitting down, having Shastrartha with that Guru there, or system of Gurus there, and convincing them of this integrated outlook, which is the sublime theory of entire Sanatana Dharma. Second aspect. Third aspect, as he was walking, I would assume that he would have his students and he would be churning out this Bhakti Stotras, because where he reinvigorated the temple system, and there are many temples where he himself has placed a very significant part of the temple and reconsecrated those temples. Have you been to Sharda Peetha, the temple, which is in POK? There is a Shri Chakra Yantra which was established by him. Then the Sharda Peetha in Kashmir, which is in India, Dal Lake. There also Shri Chakra. Assam, there is a beautiful temple called, there are 2 Kamakshi temples in India which are famous. One is in Assam, the other is in Kanchi. So Kamakhya temple is Kamakshi temple. Kamakhya in Bengali Ahomi, it is Kamakshi in Sanskritam. So he established, in fact there is in his life and work, as it has been commented or captured in that essence, they said he had a dialogue with that Kamakshi Devi. Someday, if possible, we will go through that dialogue. Because he was disturbed with the animal sacrifice. So he calls her out and does Shastrartha with Kamakshi Devi, saying this is not fair. Then he said, you are not the Ishvara of this creation, I am. So I have a better perspective of what is fair and what is unfair. What is your objection? And that is the Shastrartha that they both have. So Kamakshi temple. Have you been to Tirupati? So in Tirupati, after you go into the Sanctum Sanctorum, on the right hand side, there is a Shri Chakra Yantra that has been placed by him. So there are several such. So wherever, whichever Devi Devata that he visited, a stotra that he has composed, which has been captured as this Bhakti Granthas. Then the third is the commentaries. Then he has done his Pithamnaya, Mathamnaya, the treatise on the administrative work. All that in 16 years. You take a portion of his work, like the first 4 sutras of Brahma Sutra. On those 4 sutras, you can do research and get a PhD. I know of several people who have gotten PhD on those 4 sutras. Just to give you the gravity, the depth of it is not just like, you can flip through those pages. Each page, each line has, each word has its impact. That is how deep and impactful his work is. So when his outburst happened, why did it happen? He saw this very elderly person, ripe elderly person, in that age. होता है ना अपने को भी. We have pursued education, we have pursued our career, then children are settled, they are in colleges, probably even married, and now I have time on my hand. कुछ करते हैं. Then you look at the books, everything is in Sanskritam. I will learn Sanskritam. A little older than you, he also had that inspiration. So he saw that he was feeble, almost shivering, not because of cold, but because of the age. And in that ripe age, where one foot was hanging in the grave, what was he doing? He was memorizing this Paniniya Ashtadhyayi Sutras, the Sanskrit work by Panini. After which the bread, Panini. It was actually Panini. I am just joking. Bad joke. But. So Panini's Ashtadhyayi, how is it written? There is a verb or a root word. It's called dhatu. That root word and its meaning and the several clauses in which it is applicable, not applicable, more than applicable, those where it is not applicable is described. So each one by a sutra. This individual was at that point of time chanting Dukrum Karane. Dukrum Karane. Kru is the dhatu. Kru means to do. Karane means to do. To remember it well, Panini has added do. There is a whole sequencing, what you call today, coding. A coding system in which he has arranged it, where the do has a reference in 16, 17 other places. Wherever that do is referred, then you come back to this sutra because it has been sequenced that way. One way of looking at it. So this individual was repeating that particular sutra. Just like how we learnt mathematics table while we were growing up. At least that is how I was raised. Early in the morning, I would be woken up, get out of the bed. When I say early morning, it is like 5:36. Not 3:30 or 2:30. 5:36, I was woken up, wash face, sit down, and then do what? 2 1 2 2 4 6. That is how we were made to learn. Similar pattern, this person also was chanting Dukrung Karane, Dukrung Karane. He was memorizing it. Adi Shankaracharya ji froze there. He looked at that person and he said, Baba, for the highest, which is the purpose of this human birth, in this part of your life wherein you are almost hanging in there by a very thin thread, this is not important. Instead, you should be remembering Bhagavan. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam, Bhaja. This Dukrum Karane is not going to protect you from Samprapte Sannihite Kale. Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukrum Karane. That is the backdrop for this outburst called Bhaja Govindam. Right? If the backdrop is understood, then we can go into the first shloka. You just explained it. No, it has much deeper sense to it. That will come next week. I just ended it. We have about 2 minutes. Any questions? Oh, wow. There were about known 46 or 45 universities that were destroyed by the onslaught of the Islamic invasions, which includes Nalanda, Pataliputra, Takshashila. But I am talking about 1300 years prior to that. Because this which you are talking about is during the Gupta Maurya period. Right about a few hundred years, about 3 to 350 years later, was where the first attacks happened. Muhammad ke baad one more, and then there was Junaid. So Junaid was the first person to attack Bharatvarsha. There was a Rajput king who is attributed to have started the kingdom of Mewar, Bappa Raval. He was the first one to unite and kick them out in 740, around that time frame. It was 300 years after that is the first attack happened where all these things burn. Almost 1000 years after Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya ji. So the pristine condition of those times were much more rigorous. And it was not at the Sindh, but it was all the way spread across to what is today called Afghanistan. So from there to Tibet to down, it was the Akhanda. So the timeline is mapped. Yes. Though Takshashila, not Takshashila, the Nalanda was primarily leaning more towards the Buddhist teachings, Takshashila was more onto the Hindu dharmic teachings, according to the historical references. But there were many others all across Bharatvarsha, about 47 known such universities. Before I can come to your question, do you know what a university means? According to the then, that day's definition, it was called a Vishwavidyalaya. When is it defined as a Vishwavidyalaya? Next week, you come and ask me, but I request you to go research what makes a Vishwavidyalaya at that day. You would be shocked. You remind me of it next week. Can you fast forward your question to the next week? Because your children will raid this room now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. But please remember to ask me next week.